All right, tier ranking time. Let's do the head coach tier rankings, ranking every single team's head coach from S to D tier. Because again, if you listen to the podcast, which is on this channel, just click the live tab and you'll see all of the podcasts because they don't put them on the regular feed anymore for some reason. But you go there, you can see my full list, 1 through 32. But I always like to do the tier list as well. I feel like what that does is, again, sometimes the guy that's number 8 and the guy that's number 9, I both feel pretty similarly about, but the guy that's number 11 and number 12 I actually feel pretty differently about. And so it's kind of nice to know, I think, how I actually feel about these and maybe how I would grade each individual coach. So, with that being said, Mike Vrabel, I'm going to put him in A tier. Again, if you know me, if you've watched these, I like to save the S tier for just a few players, a few coaches in this scenario. So I don't know if I can quite put him in S tier. He has never made a Super Bowl, but at the same time, I don't know if he's ever had a Super Bowl competing team on his roster. They're a team that consistently overperforms expectations. It's not the X's and O's that are like amazing with Vrabel, although they tend to be good. It's usually just they're always ready to play. I mean, the way that they nearly upset Jacksonville in that, playoff game that wasn't technically a playoff game was completely due to coaching. That was just him, being a great coach, and they nearly, pulled off that game. Should have pulled off that game if it wasn't for a Josh Dobbs fumble touchdown in it. We then have Mike McDaniel, who I think I'm going to put in B tier. I thought it was very good what we saw year one. I think the lack of getting a great defensive coordinator in year one is an issue, but he's, being proactive, not reactive, where after 1 year he says, let's get something else happening here. Let's get Vic Fangio in the building. I like that with him. It's just 1 year, and so I want to see it a little bit more, which is why he's only in B tier, but definitely, stuff I like. And Robert Saleh, I'm also going to put in B tier. Again, haven't made the playoffs yet. Hard to put you in A tier, but I've always liked what he's done. I think he gets the most out of the talent he has. Listen, I'm sorry, but no one's making the playoffs with Zach Wilson and Mike White as your quarterback. That's just not happening. He did the most of what he could. I think did the right thing of benching Zach Wilson when he did, and I think the defensive X's and O's are very good, and I think he's a great leader. So from what I can tell, so I'm gonna put him in B tier. And Zach Taylor, my favorite Zach Taylor. If you asked me a few years ago, he'd be in D tier. He's earned, I think, B tier at this point. I still don't think he's a great head coach or anything like that, but it's hard to argue with the results of a Super Bowl appearance and a conference championship appearance, and the way that he's developed those young players is incredible. I still don't think the X's and O's are incredible, and I think that, there are some issues sometimes, but he's gotten better as a head coach every year he's entered the league, and he's one of those guys who I could easily see getting himself up to A tier and S tier, not because I feel like I could be too low on him now, but because I could see him legitimately getting better as a coach. So next up, we are going to have Kevin Stefanski, who I'm going to put in C tier. Again, not a bad head coach. There's value in Kevin Stefanski, but I do feel like when he won Coach of the Year, it was a lot of, he kind of just, I made this comparison before, but kind of put a square peg into a square hole, it felt like. Yes, he did the right thing, but it was kind of obvious that that's what he should do. All those, bootlegs and stuff like that was how you would have success with that roster. We'll see what he does with Watson. It could work out very well. But again, I don't think he's a bad head coach. He's just kind of, solid to me. So that's why I have him there. We then have, we have for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Doug Peterson. I almost blanked on his name for a second. Don't know, that was weird. Doug Peterson. You could argue B tier. You could argue A tier. I'll give him A tier. Has won a Super Bowl, right? Definitely has that on his resume. One of the rare guys to win a Super Bowl and get fired shortly after. But then he went to Jacksonville and just simplified the offense for Lawrence and made things so much easier. Again, a dream scenario, really. One thing that people didn't talk about with why that job should be so attractive is, yes, you have a superstar potential quarterback, but you also are replacing Urban Meyer. Anyone's going to look great in that scenario, but it helps that he was also great. So there has been some issues over the course of his career, which is why I can't put him in S tier, but I think that A tier feels, this feels right to me. We then have Dan Campbell, who I think I'm going to still put in B tier. Again, someone who I've never been overly impressed with the X's and O's. The main thing he's done is, gets his teams to, why he got so much attention right away was he got his teams to try hard in those early games when a lot of teams would just kind of mailed it in. I think he did a great job at establishing a winning culture, which is so difficult to do as a head coach. He is a great leader, and I think that he's hired good coordinators. So really, you could argue that he should be, A, but kind of similar to Robert Saleh. It's like you got to make the playoffs first before I can put you in A. Probably, maybe not, but I feel like that feels like maybe where you a rule I should have. So A tier for me. We're not going to have Kevin O'Connell for the Vikings. I'm going to put him in C tier. I thought that what he did year one was very good. I thought that they exceeded expectations, which is nice to see. But at the same time, it's 1 year, and how much of that was him and how much of that was them just getting lucky. I want to see a bigger sample size with him. Todd Bowles, D tier. I complained about Todd Bowles. I said they should have fired Todd Bowles midway through last year, and I think that they should have. I think that would have been the right move. I know that would have been an insane decision to make, but I just think that they pretty much wasted Brady's last year, I thought, coaching-wise. No reason that offense should have been as bad as it was. So many terrible coaching, game management stuff. You could make an argument for him being, again, great. Here's what Bowles has is he's a great defensive mind and still is a great defensive mind even as a head coach. That's what he has, and I think his mindset is, I think he kind of says, let me give someone else the offensive duties because he knows that's not his thing. The issue is Byron Leftwich was terrible at it, and he at least should have made a move off of Byron Leftwich, but I guess I get it. He didn't want to change stuff that way late into the season, but still, you weren't going to win a Super Bowl with Byron Leftwich. You have to try something, but, either way. Shanahan, S tier. What he does consistently year in and year out with the way that they can, the way that the teams consistently overperform what you should expect. That offense, we call it the Shanahan offense. What other offense do we do that? I guess maybe you could argue Sean Payton is the other one that we kind of do that with, but that's what we call it. It's, the Shanahan scheme that can make anyone good. Brock Purdy could have won a Super Bowl if he stayed healthy. That's how good the Shanahan offense is. Purdy did some nice things as well, but I'm going S tier for Shanahan. Arthur Smith, again, C tier. I've always kind of liked the X's and O's that he's done, but the talent just hasn't been there for Atlanta. This is the first year they might have some ability, but even this year, I don't know if they fully have a ton of talent, and I'm kind of worried. It's like they've had this really long rebuild in Atlanta. I hope that they don't just fire him after this year if things don't go well, because you don't have a quarterback. Things probably aren't going to go well, I think. John Harbaugh, you could argue S tier. I'm going to put him in A tier. Listen, guy won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco, but I think there has been a lack of playoff success, although, hey, almost won a playoff game with Huntley, who, listen, not easy to nearly beat the Bengals, and they nearly beat the Bengals, so definitely someone who I could see, I think he's a really good head coach. Again, teams are always prepared and all of that stuff. Is adapted to the Lamar Jackson stuff really well. I want to save S tier for, the guys who I really feel like deserve it. So I think I'm going to keep him in A tier. Eberflus, putting him in C tier. Someone who, again, I kind of liked what I saw from him year one. I thought he did a good job of kind of adapting to what Fields can do, but it's 1 year so far, and they did have the worst record in football. I can't put you too high on the list, but again, look at who they had. Of course they had the worst record in football. That's C tier. And for me, we go over to Mike McCarthy. I'm going to keep him in C tier. What McCarthy does well is hires coordinators. And hey, if you hire coordinators, then that's pretty good. But apparently he's going to call plays next year, and that's usually gone very poorly. So I'm very concerned about that for McCarthy. But the Dan Quinn hire was great, and Dan Quinn apparently loves to be a coordinator there. So I think that kind of helps him a little bit more, in my opinion. But hey, you deserve credit for it. You're the one who did it. D'Amico Ryans with the Texans, again, C tier, new coach, no idea what to make of him. I kind of like him, but with the Colts, they also have a new head coach as well. That is, Shane Steichen, still don't know how to say it, but a guy who, hopefully will be able to help Anthony Richardson. Ryans will hopefully be able to help develop C.J. Stroud. Those guys are unknowns, so as it stands right now, they are in C tier. Next up is going to be Sean McVay, who I'm going to put in A tier as well. You could definitely talk me into S tier with him, but I feel like there has been some highs and lows with McVay. I mean, I think that that's reasonable, and I don't think that, I think it maybe has this reputation of like being like a consistent, championship contender. That's not really true. They've gone to 2 Super Bowls, but I feel like the other years not really been a team that we feel like, oh yeah, they could make the Super Bowl this year. They're a team that like definitely could win it all this year. Usually they've been a very good team since he's been there, but hey, when they've had the great teams, he's made the most of it. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to another one. So you got to give him a ton of credit for that. But I'm just explaining why I don't quite have him in S tier, but still very good. He was number 7 on my overall list. Brandon Staley, I think I got to put Brandon Staley in D tier. Again, I feel like the Chargers are consistently underperforming, and at the end of the day, you got to put some of the blame on Staley. I think that, again, he had what seemed to be a pretty clear mindset and a coaching philosophy that he moved off of this season, which I didn't really understand, and it kind of didn't really make them any better. They were about the same as they were last year, made the playoffs, I guess, but like they were basically the same, and still blew the 28-point lead. I don't know how much of that was actually his fault, but regardless, D tier is where I have the Chargers and where I have Staley. The Raiders, I'm going to stick with D tier with Josh McDaniels, a guy who, again, I thought that 2 years ago, they made the playoffs. Then last year, they get Josh McDaniels. They go out and get Devontae Adams. Okay, here we go. What are we going to do this year? They have the 7th overall pick. Now, I'm not saying that was all his fault. It certainly wasn't. But, I mean, there was some talk about firing McDaniels, and I believe part of why he wasn't fired is because they couldn't financially afford to fire him. So, yeah, D tier, Josh McDaniels. At least that was a report. The fact that they couldn't afford to fire him was a report. Ron Rivera, C tier. Again, I think he's definitely a guy who a lot of people respect. Seems like his teams, you're never going to have a disaster with Ron Rivera as head coach, but are you winning a Super Bowl with him? Kind of an older school head coach at this point. I just don't know. I like him, but C tier feels fair for me. We didn't have Andy Reid, another S tier, a 2-time Super Bowl winner at this point. Incredible offensive mind. There's some issues. There have been some playoff performances that weren't great among his teams. There has been some game management stuff I don't love, but he's still very good. S tier is, the good outweighs the bad, obviously. Dennis Allen, I think I am also going to put in S tier. I think that's where he belongs. Again, it just wasn't good last year. That's pretty much all you have to say. Brian Daboll, now, again, there's a conversation to be had about where should Brian Daboll be. I think I'm going to put him in the B tier for me personally. It was so good last year. It was amazing last year how well coached that team was. It's 1 year. That's why they're only B. But it was so good. That's why I'm putting him above, even some other guys who I liked, like like Eberflus. The reason why I'm much higher on him is I think he was significantly better than a lot of these other guys. So yeah, B tier. All right, let's get a little hot takey here. Nick Sirianni, I'm going S tier. I am. Nick Sirianni, I thought, was great as a head coach last year. I love the analytics and stuff like that. The X's and O's were fantastic. He does hire good coordinators. Both of them just got coaching jobs, and we'll see how he does with new coordinators. But as it stands right now, I think there's a lot of things to like about Nick Sirianni. I'm putting him in S tier, and I know some people will be surprised, but we'll see. Mike Tomlin, this won't be controversial. Him in S tier. Again, no team constantly overperforms like the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are S tier in my book. And then Sean Payton, I'm going to put him in A tier. I haven't seen him coach in a year. So, that's why you're not S tier. But other than that, I think he's incredible, adds a ton of value to the team. You could argue should be S tier. Matt LaFleur of the Packers, I'm also going to put in B tier. I think his knock is the lack of playoff success, and maybe even some of those were his fault, like the field goal in that Tampa Bay game definitely comes to mind, but still a great coach. He is at A tier. We then have Frank Reich. Frank Reich is someone who I think I have to put in. Do I put him in D tier or do I put him? I think I put him in C tier. I'm not going to quite put him in D tier because I don't think that would be totally fair. He has done some nice things. He has been, I think, a pretty solid offensive mind. made the playoffs with Philip Rivers, stuff like that. But he did just get fired last year. That's gonna, it's gonna be held against you. I don't think he's necessarily an amazing head coach, but maybe in a new situation, if Bryce Young can be who we think Bryce Young can be, then potentially this could be a great spot for Reich. We then have Jonathan Gannon of the Cardinals, who, again, it's C tier. I don't know what to make of him. I think that he's getting maybe a bit too much criticism early on. I think that he could still be pretty good, but as it stands right now, I don't know much about you because I haven't seen you coach. It's hard to project this stuff too much, so that feels right. I then have Sean McDermott, who I think is a great head coach. I'm going to put him in A tier because, again, him, like some of these other guys, the lack of playoff success has to come into effect at a certain point. But the Bills have been a consistent championship contender for years now. And, when he took them over, they were a disaster, really. So to turn them to consistent championship contenders, yeah, that's at least A tier for me. We then have Pete Carroll, who I'm conflicted on. I think I'm going to put him in B tier. Now, I thought last year's stuff was very good. He still does those things that drive me crazy. I still feel like he has a very old school mentality with this stuff, but not necessarily as much as maybe he did in years past. I think with the new, after losing Russell Wilson, this was probably outside of winning a Super Bowl, his best coaching year. Because even the year that they went to the Super Bowl, he got a lot of criticism for the, the pass at the 1 yard line and stuff like that. So, for Pete Carroll, there's some good, there's some bad, but as a whole, at this point, I think it's fair to say the good outweighs the bad. And finally, Bill Belichick. Listen, I could go S tier because the guy has 8 Super Bowl rings, 6 as a head coach, but I don't think that that's where he's at right now. This is the right now list, so I'm going to put him at B tier. I still think the defensive coaching by far and away outweighs the bad that he has. But, he hired Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinator, as his offensive play caller. That's a fireable offense, but since he obviously is Bill Belichick, you would never fire him. But, that's an insanely just dumb decision, quite frankly. I don't know why he did that, other than because he likes Matt Patricia, it feels like, and they're friends, which is not a good decision to do that, and definitely hurt his team. I think that the game management stuff might be the worst in football. The defensive play calling might be the best in football. So he's a weird guy to evaluate, and obviously you're going to get respect, and people are going to want to play for you if you're Bill Belichick, but B tier feels fair to me. So yeah, that's my tier list. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.